Well, just to start things off, since this all unfurled yesterday, can you just tell me a little bit about your reaction to the Delta variant spike and the CDC now recommending vaccinated people wearing masks and all of that, different places in the country and including here in Oregon?
Boy, you wouldn't recognize the Capitol today as compared to yesterday, because in order to respond to the latest scientific observations, people have started putting masks back on when they're in the hallways and on the floor of the Senate. Not universally, but a significant shift. And it just reflects the fact that we thought we were out of the tunnel, or at least we were very close to the end of the tunnel, with a lot of light shining, and now we're seeing people who had vaccinations get sick, and that is sending a lot of caution, a lot of concern about the impact on children who are younger than 12, who don't have access to vaccinations, and a lot of concern that if we don't stop this disease, it will continue to mutate in ways that will threaten all of us.
Yes, absolutely. And can you tell, I know there was big news about a bipartisan infrastructure deal, and that was just announced not too long ago. And can you tell me a little bit about what that is and what it is going to achieve and the actual status of it? Is it a bill that passed both houses of Congress? Is it on its way to the president's desks and all of that?
You bet. Well, the bipartisan deal isn't fully formed yet, but it's 90% of the way there. And we're having a vote in theory tonight to get onto the bill. The bill is a shell in which the finished results of the negotiation will be inserted. And there are areas that I've been very involved in, including on water and on fire. And that's because of my role leading the interior team for the spending bill. And so I've been trying to get billions of dollars to reduce the risk of fire in our force, and I think we're going to get that. I'm trying to get billions of dollars to help with water infrastructure, lead pipe replacement, PFAS remediation, tribal sanitation, tribal water systems. I think we're going to get that. While the details remain a little unsettled, I think we're going to see a pretty strong bill in the areas I've been most keenly focused on.
Fantastic. And tell me a little bit about your reaction to some of the emotional testimony at the January 6th Commission hearing yesterday, and what we've seen so far of it. And tell me, can you also talk about how that day was for you, just looking back on it 6 months ago?
January 6th was the most bizarre day because none of us ever envisioned a mob ransacking the Capitol. It's a day in which the mob was going through the corridors, calling for the death of legislators, trying in particularly to find Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, a Democrat, and the Vice President Pence, a Republican, with the intention to do them harm and to stop the voting process. So it was so bizarre and unexpected and disturbing to see our Capitol ransacked in this fashion. And it tells you that we've gone off track as a nation. And with our understanding of the democratic process, the legitimacy of elections, and that we have a tremendous amount of work to do to restore these critical institutions.
Absolutely. In Oregon, we have the Bootleg fire.
So, Danny, before you transition, why don't I throw in something on the other half of your question?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Mike.
The testimony of our Capitol Hill officers about what happened that day was powerful. They were for fear of their life. They did not know if they were going to be torn limb from limb or lynched. They saw other officers injured. They were responding to circumstances for which they did not have good plans in place and good communication in place. But they were doing the very best they could to protect the Capitol and the process of counting presidential votes. But the thing that they noted was that now that there are so many efforts to pretend it never happened or to whitewash what happened does additional harm, that we have to have the courage to face directly and understand directly what happened, the sources of the motivations and the organizing to make sure this never happens again.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now moving on to the Bootleg fire. It's the biggest wildfire in the U.S. right now. And can you tell me a little bit about your latest efforts to get resources for wildfire relief?
You've got 400,000 plus acres, an incredible swath, and it reflects climate change. It also reflects the efforts or lack of sufficient efforts to address the vulnerability of our forests to fire. It's why I've been asking for, and it looks like I'm going to get, billions of dollars for hazardous fuel reduction and wildfire reduction activities. We have to be able to insulate the interface between our forests and our grasslands and our towns. We have to understand the best strategies in different types of forests, because it's very different in a ponderosa pine forest than it is in a Douglas fir forest. We need to be able to rehabilitate the areas that have been burned and get help for our ranchers who have lost their livestock or their fences or their feed and so forth. So much work to be done on the prevention side and on the rehabilitation side, on the forest management side. And if we're going to stop the damage in the long term, we have got to do a fast transition from burning fossil fuels to renewable energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you just touch on a little bit more about kind of like just the ongoing recovery and that idea of the state is really still reeling from all the historic wildfires from last year, even as they're facing new ones coming up?
Well, so many families who were affected by the Labor Day fires last year are still in a terrible state. So a lot of cleanup has occurred in towns, but a lot of rebuilding isn't possible until infrastructure is rebuilt. So much work to do. But what I've really noticed this year is how on edge we are. Having seen town after town after town burnt to the ground last year, we understand that how devastating it can be when the wind turns a fire into a blowtorch, and almost nothing will stop it at that point. We can slow it down with better practices, better spacing, better defensible space. I think they refer to it in terms of keeping shrubs and so forth away from your house. But it is really on all of our minds that we're going to face this every summer now. Climate change has driven us to a point where the forests are so dry, there's so much lightning, there's so much wind, there's so much fuel that we're going to face this challenge year after year after year. So we have to do everything we can to reduce the risk.
Absolutely. And speaking of climate change, Oregon also went through a record-breaking heat wave last month, and I think there's just released a report of that. The Governor Brown did, and there's another less intense heat wave forecasted for hitting the Portland area this week as well. And are you looking into addressing those types of climate change-related inclement weather events as well, in addition to fires, whether that's emergency preparedness or otherwise?
Well, we are seeing many effects of climate chaos. The fires are one, the heat dome effects are another, loss of irrigation water, which is affecting so much of the state, is another, ocean acidification affecting our shellfish off the coast. But in the past, we've normally thought of providing warming centers during the winter. Now we have to think in the terms of providing cooling centers. And in the past, we worried about fire burning down structures, but now we have to worry about the smoke doing major economic damage or health damage to our workers and our families. So this means a lot more work on smoke, which Senator Wyden and I are both deeply engaged in. I'm calling for a stability to do smoke emergencies to be able to help our agricultural system when we have things like grapes that are tainted by smoke, preparing and making sure we have standards to protect our agricultural workers who may be exposed to situations of trying to harvest crops while there's smoke in the air, and so forth.